In the last video, we take the look onto the basics of container queries. I want now to go over more complex topics to kind of show the power of this query parameters or query container queries. For this, I have prepared a more complex example that you can show what is possible with all of this. Here we have a kind of grid system in CSS, which allows us to make this kind of complex buildings. And all of them, and now it's really own components, like here, that's like the card with all that properties and definitions and so on. And all of them using the same component, all you can now see is based on container queries. Of course, some of them are allowed to have like multiple rows, some of them have multiple columns. It's like a more complex grid system, but it kind of scales based on the container queries. You can see like this thing here jumps when it gets into a specific size. We also it also jumps again if we're changing the widths or the amount of columns in the grid. You see like this thing was before on the right side, and it kind of fills up the whole styling here. And after all, you have like this setup with all of this in the same size. But it's more or less like a more complex example what is possible with all of this, because you have like stylings here that relates on like a in between that kind of let this content be placed differently, and some of them using then like this behavior and some of them using this, and all of this is based on container queries. I will not go too deep in that styling because it's a lot of styling, but we will go over the main concept of it to that you can understand what the kind of styling of it is. Okay, quick overview. We have a few stylings and all of them are this like custom stylings, but what now important is that we have like this two jumps. One of them is reached when it is below 415 pixels. We can quickly take a look into the container here. Here it is like 386. We can kind of try to get the right amount of size. You can already see that all of this are containers. I can all activate them, that you can kind of see how all of this works together. So, alright. So the container in that example is this whole thing here, and this one, for example, reached 433. That is still in the range of this one. That means this stuff get applied, and in that example, it kind of changing it to the flex direction column and aligning it perfectly and so on. Then we have here stylings that, for that example, it's the with 887. Here we have like the second jump, that's kind of the jump where it covers this in-between section. And here we defining like an in-between state. That means we saying it should be bigger than 415 pixels and smaller than 700 pixels. And here we are adjusting then some stylings, and finally like everything that is above 700 pixels then get represented like that. And that's kind of all what happens here behind the scenes. I will quickly reload the page. Yeah, could need some time to load the images. And yeah, that's kind of all to that example. That means we have like 3 steps and we have an in-between state, And also what could be important is if you're checking where the containers are placed, they are placed above the component. And that's what I said in the last video, that it's important where you place the container type, because here in that case, like the component itself saying, okay, I have container queries, but the container in that example gets setted by the container that kind of creating the grid of all that business informations, and that one setting the container type inline size for all elements where the component is placed into. Yeah, then let us quickly go over the last preparation I made. You are a front-end developer working with Angular. I have created a course for everyone wanting the latest info on Angular 17 and 18. It covers built-in control flow, standalone components, signals, migrating to Angular 17, and building an app from scratch. The course is in the description. We will quickly take a look into what happens if we're changing the type to be size, because it's interesting to know that if you say using container type size, you have a problem, because you're telling that component that it should not be using the kind of sizing that it would always do, because with the size container type, you has to manage how the components be shown. That means if you not have like a height of 500 pixels and so on, the browser don't like want to work with like the inline content, because with the size you are responsible for how the container reacts to size changes. You see that if I'm using size, it still works with the queries we have, but as said, the container is not like knowing the content or not using the content to be considering the size. In that last example, I think it gets relatively clear. If we now go here in the size container example, we have here the resizable content and we have the container type size. And here you already can see we're setting a size, because the container kind of is, I would say, position absolute in a kind of way. That means it places where it is, but it don't give a care about the content of it. And what we now can do with this is we can define container queries that are related with the width and the height. In that example here, if we scaling it to the side, you see nothing really changes. The content gets longer, but nothing changes in a specific way. If we now scaling it to the bottom, you see it changes its styling. If we now go like smaller again, it's not changing its styling. That means we defining with this container queries here how the layout should behave in a two-dimensional way. That means you are responsible for the width and the height, and that are always the case. That's also only an example. You can of course get that code base from my GitHub repository, but hopefully you kind of understand now the whole container query topic. Alright then, thank you guys. I hope you liked the video and subscribed for new videos, and hopefully I will see you in a next video.